Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. My name is Ty Patton. It's time to put all the research together. In this video, I will build lineups using the players I have researched and targeted in my previous videos for Week 6 of the NFL. First, let's recap the players that we did put in the player pool this week. I've added some and subtracted some, and I'll tell you why as we move along. Quarterbacks that I'm targeting: Mahomes, Watson, Ryan, Jackson, Prescott, and Cousins. Now, remember, these are only players from the main slate. Excludes the Sunday night, Monday night, and for anybody that has a play participates in season long. Remember, the Carolina Tampa Bay game is at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time in the morning on Sunday because they're playing in England. Running backs that I'm targeting: Elliott, Kamara. Make sure real quick here. He had a yesterday. Kamara still has a questionable tag. Always check the injury report at 11:30 on Sunday as well. Fournette, Bell, Cook, Ingram, Henry, Drake, Carson. Carson's another one that has a questionable tag. I added Johnson, but I'm leaning towards he's probably not going to play. With some of the information that I've read, he has a phenomenal matchup this week, but I don't think he's going to be in the game. So his backup, I believe, is Chase Edmonds. Let's make sure here while we're on this. His GM said he was encouraged by Johnson's progress as he goes through the rehab process with his back injury. Johnson did not log any official practice work the last couple of days, but Keem's comment at least provide reason to be optimistic. There were some other things that I read that were not so optimistic. But Chase Edmonds is his backup. So if you're going to use him, be aware of that. I also added Devontae Freeman from Atlanta. It's a phenomenal matchup for him as well in the same game with Johnson. And with a lot of the ownership going to the passing game, you could see the scenario where Freeman would offer a lot of value, and he's only $5,800. So I'm adding him, and I'm also adding Chris Thompson from the Washington Redskins. It's a really good matchup for Thompson. He's not the lead back, but Miami's number 32 against the run, and this is their first week without Gruden. Thompson was really upset about them firing Gruden. So, with the narrative, is a big reason that I'm adding Chris Thompson. Wide receivers: Michael Thomas. I like Thomas a lot this week if Jalen Ramsey's not playing. Jalen Ramsey's not playing. Michael Thomas is one of my favorite wide receivers on the board this week. Tyler Boyd, DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald, Jones and Sanu from Atlanta, Cooper Kupp, Adam Thielen and Diggs from Minnesota, Kansas City's Robinson, Jacksonville's D.D. Westbrook. I've added Paul Richardson. I like Richardson. Keenum's going to be playing in this game. A lot of people are probably going to get a lot of ownership to McLaren. I just don't like McLaren's matchup with, I believe his name is Xavier Howard for Miami. He's the one bright spot on their defense, and that's who's going to be probably matched up against McLaren. So I like Richardson's, and I actually removed McLaren. I added Keyshawn Johnson from Arizona. I like all the Arizona receivers this week. Fitzgerald, Johnson, and Kirk actually has progressed to a probable status this week. So he was questionable yesterday, and he's down to probable. I've added Crowder from the Jets. I think the Jets are going to be able to put a few points on the Cowboys, and I know a lot of talk I've heard is people expecting the Cowboys to go in and blow them out. I am a Cowboys fan. I just don't think it's going to go that way. And the first game that Crowder played with Darnold this year, before Darnold left because of mono, he targeted Crowder 17 times in that game. Crowder had 14 receptions. It wasn't the leading scorer that week, but 14 receptions. That's 14 points. And at his salary this week, he is actually, I believe he's 3,700. Make sure here. No, I'm sorry, $4,000. I I definitely see him getting 4 times value if he can get a touchdown somehow. So I kind of like Crowder as maybe a pivot off of Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell's getting a lot of ownership right now in the projection on numbers, um, projected ownership numbers. I'm sorry, and I'll share that with you here in a minute. Okay, and I've added Kuti from Houston to go with Hopkins. I'm not as high this week on Fuller. I really hate using that phrase because last week I used it. I wasn't as high as everyone else on McCaffrey. And even though I had McCaffrey, I should have had him in every lineup, and I didn't. And it cost me. But I do like Kuti, and I like a lot of players from that Kansas City Houston game. I added Amari Cooper from Dallas to go because I had Prescott in the quarterback position and I didn't have any targets. And I looked into it for he's questionable, but he's got a really good matchup this week against the Jets. And I know a lot of ownership's probably going to go to Ezekiel Elliott, but I do like Cooper. And they're a fairly large favorite on the road, 8 or 9 points. Um, and the game total is only 43.5. So, but I like Cooper in this game. I can see them building up a lead with the pass game and then trying to seal it away with Zeke. I added Alden Tate from Cincinnati. Tate is actually he's gotten 6 red zone targets for Cincinnati, and their receivers are really Ross is out. There's now Erickson's probably going to be out, and he's been targeted a lot. Week 5 is targeted 6 times. Week 4, 6 times. Week 3, 10 times, and week 2, 2 times. And it's pretty much just him and Boyd. And he's taking the targets away from Eifert. He's a nice big target for Dalton. Seems like Boyd's getting the a lot of the work between the 20s, and now Dalton's got a big target down close. And I think Cincinnati will be able to score against Baltimore. It's not the Baltimore defense of old, and they do give up some points to the passing game, and they really don't have anybody that can match up with Cincinnati's receivers. On the other hand, Cincinnati can't match up with their offense at all either. So there should be some points in that game. And it's actually 47.5 point total, and Baltimore's 11-point favorite at home. I also added Preston Williams from Miami. I feel like that game has a lot of value, and that there's going to be some points. Battle of two winless teams, and I just feel that Williams, perhaps Kenyon Drake, are sneaky players for Miami. I did remove Chark, and that's why I added Westbrook. Chark's going to get a lot of ownership this week, some recency bias, but his matchup with Lattimore is not a great matchup for him. And Dede Westbrook actually has the best matchup out of the slot position. So I'm going to be targeting him and not Chark. I'll let the ownership go to Chark and get some leverage by using D.D. Westbrook. As I mentioned, I added Christian Kirk. I would have had him initially, but he had he's back to this scene where he was probable. He was limited on Thursday, and I just seen on another site he was probable. The cap remained on Kirk's reps as he works his way back from a right ankle injury, and ultimately the Cardinals will give a sense of his potential to return this weekend with the release of Friday's practice report. So if you have access to that, or just go to their website, check out what they said. If he was on the practice field today, Christian Kirk. If he's out, Keyshawn Johnson it's an added value, because then you just have Fitzgerald and Keyshawn Johnson. And I added Brown from Baltimore as another target for Jackson, along with Andrews. And Brown is Marquise Brown. He's 6,200. He has a questionable tag too. There's a lot of these guys have the questionable, which is scary. That's why you always got to make sure you check that an injury report at 11:30 on Sunday morning. Brown remains sidelined at Thursday's practice. Previous reports suggest that Brown's ankle issue is nothing serious, but now that he's logged back-to-back missed sessions, the speedy wideout status for Sunday's game against the Bengals figures to hinge on what he's able to do on practice Friday. So keep an eye on that. He has received, week 2 he had 13 targets. Week 3 he had 9. Week 4 he had 7. Week 5 he had 5. So he's getting a lot of targets from Jackson, and he can break a slate. I mean, the first week when he got all those targets and touchdowns, he was, one of the top scoring, if not the top scoring player that week. So keep an eye on him. I added him. And I also added Lockett from Seattle. His matchup, the Browns are beat up in the secondary, and his matchup is pretty good, and he's getting a lot of targets from Russell Wilson. And I also feel that game has the potential to be high scoring as well. The total on it is 48.5. So Vegas obviously think it's going to be high scoring as well. And maybe having some exposure to that game would be a good idea when you're building your lineups. Okay, tight ends are a lot. The players that I've decided to target is a lot less than the wide receivers. Have to have some variety at the wide receiver position. Hooper from Atlanta, and I can tell you he's getting all the ownership too. He's the talk on a lot of the different shows and on the internet. Everybody knows he's facing the worst team against the tight end. And there are situations where I don't just ignore a player because they're chalky. I mean, i.e., Christian McCaffrey shouldn't have to be told to play him, obviously. But Hooper is getting a lot of targets, and he's in a lot of the statistical categories that I revealed to you in my tight end defensive special teams video. And I'll have my share of Hooper. And he's $2,000 less than Kelsey, which brings me to Kelsey. Kelsey could be contrarian this week. If everybody's spending down the $2,000 to get to Hooper, Kelsey can break a slate too. He had a game last year, I believe he scored 43 points, and that from a tight end is definitely a slate breaker. So keep that in mind. If all the ownership is going to Hooper, I will have my share of Kelsey. I like Mahomes this week anyway, and I feel like with their wide receiver group being so questionable and banged up, that Kelsey will be the one that Mahomes leans on. Next is Andrews from Baltimore, Disley from Seattle, and Ertz from Philadelphia. Defense special teams that I'm going to focus on are Baltimore, Denver, the Vikings, Miami, and Dallas. As I mentioned, I am very interested in getting exposure to the Kansas City Houston game. I want to use as many players from that as I can. It has the highest total of 55. The past couple weeks, the top scoring lineups on Draftkings have utilized players from the top scoring games. It just makes sense, and I'll be trying to get a lot of pieces of that game somewhere in my lineups. I took that total amount of players that I just read to you was, I believe it's 36. And I use an optimizer. And the reason I do that is I want to see how many lineups it can generate using the players that I have, and show me different. I might not get every combination by manually building, so I do it. And this week, I was surprised. It's one of the biggest weeks that I've had as far as lineups. It actually generated 108 lineups out of 36 players, which I was happy with. I did set it at max exposure of 25%, but the optimizer I have, if it can't fit something, it'll go to the best value. So there's a couple players. Le'Veon Bell was 38%, Fournette was 36%, and Fitzgerald was 35% when it optimized the lineups. I only put one restriction, and that was that each quarterback had to have a wide receiver or tight end target. And so I let it run. And this is I'm going to show you the very first lineup that it spit out, and we'll talk about it. Quarterback, not my first choice, but now, and remember, these are players from the player pool. The computer only knows what you tell it, so these are still my players. It's not my top choice, but this is what it spit out. Lamar Jackson, running back was Le'Veon Bell. Leonard Fournette, wide receiver was Crowder, but it was Fitzgerald. Pass him up. Crowder, which is 4,000. And DeAndre Hopkins, which I like that, getting a piece of that Houston, Kansas City game. Tight end was Andrews. He's got a questionable tag as well. And flex, this is definitely not one of my favorite things to do, but build the lineup that it has. I don't normally like that double tight end thing, especially tight end scoring is down. I'll probably play this. I play multiple contests. I'll play two here. I'll play the Millie Maker. I'll play some head to head. I'll play some double up. I'll play some low entry tournaments. I'll get this one in there somewhere. And defensive special teams was the Vikings. And I believe it used all but $100. So it's really strong. You got Jackson stacked with Andrews, Le'Veon Bell, and Fournette. They get a tremendous amount of touches. We covered that in the running back video. Fitzgerald has a phenomenal matchup this week against Atlanta. And you got Crowder, who Darnold's back this week, and Crowder, he peppered him with targets the only time that they got to play together this year. Then you have Hopkins, who's in the highest total game of the week, Kansas City game. And you got, as I mentioned, Andrews stacked with Jackson. And then you have Hooper, who is in the second highest projected total game. He's one of the top scoring tight ends. So it makes sense. I like to have a running back in that flex position and shoot for as 65 touches or more. And with Bell and Fournette, you're definitely well on your way. 65. So I'm thinking I can get, yeah, I'll get 43 touches between Bell and Fournette. I'm pretty sure about that, which makes me happy. And then Fitzgerald and Crowder and Hopkins, I can see double digit targets for all three of them. So really good and really strong lineup. I like it. This isn't my first lineup that I built. I mentioned the optimizer did this, but there you have it. That's what the optimizer did. Now, please remember, I wanted to mention this. Please remember the research I put together this week and any week is designed to help you build your lineups. It's not for me to just give you picks or just show you that lineup. You tune in on the lineup building video, and here's your lineup. Go play it in all your contests. That doesn't really do you any good, and it's your money, your contest. It's just to help you. I'm showing you some of the research, some of the numbers that you might not have, and I'm giving you my opinion. Maybe an opinion that you have a different opinion. I've talked to Ryan on here. He's got some really good insight, and we want to get this chat going on this channel. Um, and he actually opened my eyes to a couple things, and like I was high on, for instance, I was really high on Kamara. He likes Thomas, and I think I was getting caught up in recency bias because of what McCaffrey just did to Jacksonville. It's easy to think that Kamara will do the same thing. Well, Kamara is actually, as I'm looking at it right now, the site that I use, he's second in ownership right now, the second highest player in ownership. So a nice pivot off of him would be Thomas. And Thomas is a phenomenal play if Ramsey's not playing this week. So you can get a lot from different people. And I just wanted to mention that, otherwise I just have one video a week for 5 minutes and say, here's some players that I looked up, go play them. And I want this site to be a lot more than that. I can provide some, hopefully I provide some value and help you build lineups. And I look forward to on Monday when I do my recap and Monday Night Football Showdown videos. I look forward to any comments or opinions or anything that any of you have. And please definitely let us know if you should win or cash or had a really good week or did you have a different take. Definitely want to hear those things. Now, this is the lineup that I've built using the players from the player pool. I just wanted to show you the strategy that I'm really big on this week. Spending up at quarterback. Oftentimes I like to spin down, but I really like Patrick Mahomes this week at home and coming off a loss, highest total game. As I mentioned, I want a lot of exposure to that game. I also like Le'Veon Bell. You're probably saying, but Ty, you're a Dallas fan. Yes, I am. But I also seen what Aaron Jones did, and I try not to get caught up in recency bias. But if you look at the Jets, Le'Veon Bell is on the field more than any other running back in the NFL right now, other than Christian McCaffrey. And so it doesn't matter if they're winning or losing. Le'Veon Bell's out there and he gets targets and he can go to the house and till Dallas can prove that they can shut down a running game. I'm going to continue. I definitely don't make lineups with my heart. I use my head, and Le'Veon Bell to me is guaranteed touches and a nice floor. So I'm definitely going to have my share of him in my lineups. Le'Veon Bell. Next is one that a lot of people probably aren't as high on because of how terrible the team is. I just have a feeling that this game is going to be more than 41 points. I can see it having some scoring, and Miami does use Drake. They use him out of backfield as well, or catching passes. And I just have a feeling I like him, and he's getting low ownership, and I feel like he's one player that helps me be contrarian and spend up at some other places without punting. This is not a punt play. I don't punt any position. My next pick is at wide receiver, and it's from the Houston Kansas City game, and it's Kiki Kuti. And I'm also taking Hopkins from that game. I have two receivers. From Houston, bringing it back with Mahomes. And before I do that, I'm going to Fitzgerald. I think he's going to get a ton of targets. His matchup is one of the best this week against Atlanta. Tight end, I'm spinning up at tight end. So I have Mahomes and Kelsey, and I got Kuti and Hopkins. 4 players from the highest total game on the board, and I really like that approach. In the flex position, I did what I said I don't like to do, so I guess I kind of understand why the optimizer did. But when looking at value in players and getting exposure to the second highest game, now I have Fitzgerald from Arizona, and I'm going to use Hooper from Atlanta. So I have 2 players from the second highest, 4 players from the highest scoring, and 2 players from the second highest. And defensive special teams, I'm going to team up. It could be a trap. Defenses are so volatile anyway. And I was talking to Ryan about this earlier in the week. It's really interesting that the Dolphins are more expensive than the Vikings. Yeah, Dolphins are 2,700 and the Vikings are 2,600. Either that's meant to make you take the Vikings, but I think Miami will be low ownership. I think a lot of ownership is going to go down to this 1,500, because if you can use that and get the value, I was talking to Ryan about this earlier. If you can use that, I mean, you only need 6 or 4 points gets you value at 3 times value. And if you would somehow get a defense special teams touchdown, that would be a really nice team to use, and it frees up a lot of salary in other places. But for now, this is what I like. This is I'll be using this lineup somewhere. I just like it. I'm getting a lot of it. 6 out of the 9 players are from the top 2 projected total games, and so I'm going to be building a lot of my lineups around that. I also wanted to share with you guys real quick the some of the projected ownership that I seen last night. As I look over, some of it's actually the top 3 right now are Cook with 23.6%, Kamara with 22.7%, and Mahomes with 22%. But I broke it down by position last night, and this was about 11 o'clock. Mahomes for quarterbacks, Mahomes was number 1 at 21.3%, Prescott at 11.2%, and Watson at 10.4%. I can actually tell you if any of that has changed. Let's see, Mahomes 22, Prescott's up, or is 11.3, And actually, Lamar Jackson's jumped ahead of Deshaun Watson now. Jackson is 10.7 and Watson's 9.9. So if we go to running back, last night, Kamara was at 23.7. Cook was right underneath him at 21.6, and Carson was at 20.9. Now Cook is ahead of Kamara. Cook is 23.6. Kamara is 22.7, and Chris Carson 20.1. So same three, just in different order. Wide receiver, Hopkins was receiving the most at wide receiver at 22.2%. Watkins from Kansas City, 19.9%. Lockett at 17.3%. And Michael Thomas at 16.3%. And now the ownership is Hopkins is number one at 19.6%. Lockett's number two at 17.9%. Sammy Watkins is 17.6%. Definitely check your injury report. And Cooper Kupp's moved up to number four ahead of Michael Thomas at 16.6%. So maybe there's suspicion that Jalen Ramsey's going to be playing, which I would definitely temper my expectations if Ramsey's in the game. Tight end was Kittle 18%, Kelsey at 15.5%, and Andrews at 14.9%. And it's Kittle, Kelsey, and it's stayed the same overnight. And I can also share with you the defensive special teams. Ravens were 6.6%, Tennessee 6.4%, and 49ers at 6.4%. And right now, oh, wow. The Titans are 6.3%, the 49ers are 6.2%, and the Ravens are 5.9%. So people were spending down to free up that money. And the Jets are actually, you're right, Ryan, they're getting a lot of lower ownership. I thought it would be higher at that price. Right now, they're at 3.1%. So it's chancy. I mean, if you believe in the narrative that Dallas is going to go in there and beat the doors off of the Jets, then you don't want to get negative points, which can happen. Not likely, but it can happen if you give up too many. You give up in the 30s, you start losing points on defense. And again, different sites have different projected ownership numbers. I'd look at a couple of them and try to average them out. I wanted to mention that next week I will be adding the flex position, probably to the wide receiver or the defensive special teams tight end videos, or I might just do tight end and then add flex and defensive special teams together. That way I'm covering every position. I just obviously the players I have, I want to use them in multiple different ways. And my personal preference to build lineups is to get 3 running backs in my lineup, which means putting one in the flex. There's some things I wanted to mention before I go. Focus on players from the games with the highest totals, especially if you're stacking. If you're playing in the larger GPP, you definitely should be stacking games and focus on those games that have the high totals. Watch ownership, and this allows you to be contrarian and gain leverage. Now, it doesn't mean in every situation do you just take the player that's less owned, but in some situations, gaining leverage to add another, not using Kamara this week and using Thomas can get you leverage on the field and save you in salary for the two. I believe Kamara is actually more interesting, though. Michael Thomas went up. Yeah, Kamara is 8,000 and Michael Thomas, well, it's only $200, but it's still a difference. And you use leverage that way, not just to get a cheaper player. always look at the injury report at 11:30 on Sunday mornings. That's when teams have to disclose their injury report. And I've seen it through the years. A player during warm ups gets a hamstring tightened up or something, and has the flu. And all of a sudden, they're not in the lineup when you've got all your lineups done at 9 in the morning, and then you look at 1 o'clock and you got an X by that player's name with a big fat zero to follow it. So always make sure you check that. And again, remember, people with season long teams, I got to make those changes as well. The Tampa Bay Carolina game is at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time in the morning, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time Sunday morning, because they're playing in England. Don't punt any position just so you can spend up elsewhere. Um, Taking a zero is to me is not a good strategy to get a player, because if you're willing to take a zero to get up to the player that's projected to get 20 points, actually what you're getting is 10 points, because you're only getting half of what that player is worth because you had to use another player to get up there and get it. Build your lineups and make sense out of them. Use a game script, and I definitely don't believe in punting. I do believe in finding value, and if I have money left over at the end and I can find someone better, I'll use it, but I don't have any problem leaving money on the table either. Don't suffer from FOMO. I heard this a few weeks ago, and it really makes sense. It's called fear of missing out. And you probably listen to a lot of different people. You watch different shows, and they're all saying, "Oh, you got to have Ezekiel Elliott. You got to have Zeke in your lineup. If you don't have Zeke, just saying that for instance, because last week really Zeke, his price, and he only got you 18 points, me included. That's not value. So don't get caught up if it doesn't make sense and that's not what you want to do. Don't get caught up in being and suffering from the FOMO. And also, what goes hand in hand with this, don't get caught up in recency bias. You're not as bad as you looked last week, and you're not as good as you looked last week. So just remember that. And a lot of people there'll be a lot of people on Fuller this week because he scored the highest amount of points last week. His ownership wasn't that high last week. A lot of the ownership was on Hopkins, and I watch that, and a lot of times I just go away from that. I use recency bias to actually help myself be contrarian in a lot of situations. Running backs, you're looking for the touches. Try to project 65 or more if you're going to use 3 of them. Can you get there? That's a good number based on what I've shown you in the running back videos, breaking it down what each touch is worth. 65 or more gets you there. Wide receivers is targets. Focus on the targets and the matchups. Identify the players that are getting the red zone touches. Touchdowns are very, very difficult to project. So volatile from week to week. Focus on the players that when they do get down there, they're getting don't. Years ago, I used to build fantasy lineups, and the only thing I wanted to do was try to figure out if I thought they could score a touchdown, because 6 points is obviously faster than 60 yards or 300 yards from a quarterback, and we all know that that's not the way to do it. I kind of look at touchdowns as a bonus, but when I can't decide between 2 close salary players or 2 close matched up players, I'll look at the red zone numbers. Are they getting a lot of targets? Remember, Larry Fitzgerald, one of the reasons I like him a lot this week, other than his matchup, is he's received 7 red zone targets inside the 20. All 7 of those have been inside the 10. So when he gets down there, Murray's looking for him. And so keep that in mind. They don't really use a tight end in Arizona. Again, game script. Does the lineup doesn't make sense? When I showed you the optimizer lineup and the lineup that I manually built, I showed you why. I'm using 4 players from the highest total game and 2 players from the second highest total game. I just want a lot of exposure to those games. So touches, targets, and touchdowns, 3 T's is going to equal fantasy points. No matter how you break it up, it's just a matter of getting the ones right, and that solves the big mystery every week. So it's always easy to play the lineup on Monday after the game's played. So I want to thank you guys for joining me, and I hope these videos give you some value and help you build winning lineups. If you see Cowboy Fan 215, I believe it's up here, in any contest, that's me. Feel free to post any comments or opinions you may have below. And if you have any questions that I can help you with, or you would just want my opinion on something, just drop them below and I'll answer them. I'll be out of town this week doing a festival with my fiance. So I'll be sitting around a lot looking at my phone. So feel free to drop any questions or opinions that you might have. And also on Monday, please post if you were able to cash or if you had really good luck or anything like that. And Monday, I will have a recap video and a Monday Night Football Showdown video in the afternoon. So again, thank you for being here. Appreciate your time. Good luck this weekend. And this is all about winning daily fantasy sports. My name is Ty Patton. Have a great weekend. Thank you.